Now, just before we get to Stuart Barnes, to let you know, our rugby coverage, of course, is with thanks to Energia, and they sponsor rugby at Ireland at all levels. And we're coming together with them. We're looking forward to hosting a send-off for the Irish team ahead of the Women's World Cup, which is obviously coming quickly into view. So we're going to be at the Mansion House, thank you very much, on the 13th of August. It's kind of a send-off for the players, coaches. We'll have some past legends as well. So it's all in association with Energia. We'll play it out for you when we do it, but it's going to be a big show at the Mansion House on the 13th of August ahead of the World Cup that we're looking forward to. So just to mention that. Like I said, Stuart Barnes is with us. You can read his work in the London Times, where he's been for many a year now, and we're delighted he's with us on the line. Hi, Stuart. How you doing?
Very well, thank you.
So we'll go big picture in a moment. Just on this team, Andy Farrell has named. When you take into account the injuries, he hasn't changed a whole amount. I guess there was no great expectation he would.
No, it's some interesting changes. I think the front row is fascinating. I think Genge maybe should have started, and that's certainly been my big theme in the Times this morning. I was also a little surprised with the nature of the second row. I'd have thought that they may have gone for two back rowers on the bench when they've got Byrne and Chesham there, because that doubles up in the second row. And you look at Australia, they look very committed to being much more aggressive on the floor than they were last week. So it's fascinating. And of course, there's the centres. Was he fit before or wasn't he? But I don't know. My choice from day one was the Irish centres. If you wanted to play a certain way against Australia, the Scots are very good centres. Now we don't. Now we've got a sort of a Scottish, let's call it a Celtic pair of centres. They're still very good.
Yeah. The word seems to be, we were speaking to Rory O'Connor, our rugby correspondent out there, seems very much to be that it was Ringrose and Aki, and that would tally with the sense he's gone with the two in
Yeah,
tandem from each country. And I guess it's quite good for the game in the way that Gary Ringrose put his health first and said after the session, I don't feel quite so good, take me out.
outstanding. I mean, it's not easy. I mean, I've been in that position before, and you just want to play. And obviously, it's a little bit more sophisticated than it was now. But people sometimes they say, we'll make the decision for players, and it's not easy because this second test, Gary Ringrose hasn't played in a test match. It could have been one of the rugby sporting days of his life. And if you think you're an outstanding top of the tree sportsman, world class even, then you don't get many days like this in your life, and you can be 30 years on looking back and thinking, what if? So it shows remarkable maturity and good sense to make the decision, dare I say, in a sport where lots of us never really found any sense at all.
Yeah. Owen Farrell has done enough in the midweek game to earn a place on the bench. Any
Mm.
great issue with that based on what you saw midweek?
Well, he's I, I hear he's practicing his kicking in training, but he hasn't been kicking. He's had this groin injury, and if he's not a kicker, and they're relying on Blair Kinghorn, who's an outstanding kicker, but kicking isn't about turning up and doing a bit of practice on the day. This is something you do week in, week out, and you get used to the psychological pressures of being a kicker. Um, and if the Lions are going into this game with Farrell, who hasn't been kicking, and Kinghorn, who doesn't because Ramos does all the kicking for Toulouse and Russell does it for Scotland, then one injury to Russell and they're in a right pickle. I possibly think I don't think Marcus Smith has had enough of a chance as a 10. When he has had it, I don't think he's taken it. And I don't think Finn Smith has looked a test match player. So I can see the call for Farrell there, but he hasn't played against anyone of any real note. And I must say, the way he wears 12 and takes that first receiver ball so much, I don't want to see Finn Russell taking it 5 meters deep and shuffling across the pitch and Australia chasing him. I want Finn Russell to be taking that ball most of the time as the first man and in charge, because no matter what they say in the country in which I live, Farrell is not the man who has the great understanding of rugby in the Lions squad. It's Finn Russell, and he has to be the main man. And you see both the Smiths looking as if they're slightly overawed with Farrell there. I don't think Finn Russell will be for a second, but you mustn't be in that situation where someone's saying, look, we'll take the pressure off you. He thrives on pressure, he handles pressure, he sees the game well. Whereas Owen is very good at um, turning his coach's game plan into reality. Finn Russell is very good when that game plan isn't working at coming up with something else. And that's why I don't think Owen Farrell is the great reader of the game everyone says he is. I think he's a coach's captain, not a player's captain. And I think Finn Russell is the exact opposite. He's someone you just trust. Hey, we're getting in a bit of trouble. I think he'll turn it around. The last 2 years, I think because of working with Van Graham at Bath, who is quite a conservative player, he's understood the merit of kicking and territory when perhaps before playing in France after Scotland, he really, he backed his skill all the time. Now I think he has a fine understanding of what it takes to be a world class number 10. And I want him to be. Toja is captain, but Finn Russell is by some way the main man in my eyes, alongside Gibson Park, who I think probably is his servant, but a very important servant.
If you take your point on Russell to its natural conclusion, the talent and the IQ and the adaptability married to what Van Gran maybe has given him, he's become kind of the complete player then in your eyes?
I, I always had a lot more time for Finn Russell than a lot of my countrymen. In my days when I was with Sky, I'd go up to Glasgow and I was watching those missed passes of his before he was doing them in the international arena. That try for Hugh Jones. He haunted England with those cutout passes. And even this year, Finn Russell took a right old kicking when England beat Scotland and he missed the last kick. And colleagues and friends and English players said, good, see, he can't do it. And I was saying, if you watch the game, the best player on the pitch that day was Finn Russell. And every now and again, people do miss kicks, and that's a fact of life. But what's interesting is since that aberration, and it was an aberration for him, he hasn't crumbled. He's got better and better, and his goal kicking on this Lions tour has been fantastic.
Oh, it's looked great. And if I'm not mistaken, that day, his colleague, I think, who touched down, could have bought him a few more yards in away
Yeah,
from that nasty dip at Twickenham.
yeah, absolutely true. Although I think Finn Russell's the sort of bloke who'd say, put me on the touchline, put me a couple of meters further away, I'll nail it. He has that confidence you need. So um, I was delighted to see the way he bounced back from that last kick. He didn't bounce back from the game because he was superb.
Yeah.
And he's been very good for my old team, Bath. And he has just looked so mature in the red shirt of the Lions. So mature.
Who else have you liked from the Lions' perspective? I was going to say across the tour. I guess across the tour, but in particular, Test 1.
I thought Genge was impressive. I think his scrummaging has improved. I think his ability to attack the gain line in broken field was significant for 50 minutes. And that's sort of why I would like to see him starting and not coming off the bench. Um, I think I think Gibson Park has been excellent and slightly understated. He does what he needs to do. The two of them have been a lovely partnership. Um, I've enjoyed Jones outside centre, though I would have picked Gary Ringrose just for the nature of the game. They would be my standouts because I'll be honest, I don't think, no, I don't think it's definitely not been a vintage Lions tour in terms of the quality of the rugby. It hasn't, and it doesn't help sometimes when Andy sort of says, they come up with the slogans beyond the beyond, and what was it they said? we want to be the greatest Lions team of all time. And you get 20-year-olds like young Pollock saying that with no concept of the history of the shirt. And it's not their fault, but is Saturday may be an okay Australian team, but there's been a lot of better Australian teams in the last 30 odd years, and you can't be great if you're playing a weak team. And this is, I don't know, let's say from 1989 onwards is the weakest opposition I think the Lions have faced. So, if they win 3-0, they should win 3-0, and it won't be a great achievement. If they win 2-1, then you'll say, and they lost to Argentina, it's a pretty average tour, really. Their test
Yeah.
record would be 2-2.
Yeah.
And you can forget the old magic of South Africa and New Zealand and the regional matches because, it's really now Lions is a build up to a series. It's not really a tour anymore.
Mm.
And in Australia, there's just not the strength in depth. And Joe Schmidt was absolutely right to pull his players away because the test team have a weakness, strength in depth. So it doesn't make it easy for the Lions. And maybe that's one of the reasons they haven't really risen because there hasn't been an occasion to which they need to rise.
Yeah, you see, you've hit upon the fatal flaw here, which I usually get to in another 10 minutes in the analysis chat. But it's Genge over Porter, or maybe the lack of telepathic understanding between Jones and Aki. When you get into these conversations, you're into the realm of marginal gains, and the Lions do not need marginal gains to beat this Australian side, and that is the fatal flaw.
That's exactly what you're. If you're talking about the Springboks and New Zealand,
Yeah,
that's what you're talking about. If you're talking about Australia, I want the Lions to be talking about if it all clicks with the team we've got, we're going to go out and we're going to play splendid rugby and we're going to splatter the Wallabies because they do have the potential to do that. I don't want to see them being a little bit scared of their shadow and saying, do we go Porter over Genge because it's an Irish front row, or do you say what's the maximising the potential of this team? And I think looking at this season, looking at this tour, it's having Genge and that dynamism there. I also think it's an interesting one because I don't think Joe Smith, the biggest certainty of the day will be when he chats to Andrea Piardi, he'll be saying, look at the angle Porter's going to scrummage. And if Genge is scrummaging straight, I think he got done once in the first test. If he's only getting done once again, the rest of his game is so very good that you just think, I think that's a negative selection.
yeah, okay. Skelton and Valentini are back in, and they've gone 6-2 on the bench, and there is kind of a hope that they'll be better for having a game under their belts, which is quite damning, by the way. We were saying, I was talking to Rory O'Connor before you joined us, quite damning of Rugby Australia's preparation for this test tour, that they looked a little light on game time in the first test. You'd be very familiar with Joe Schmidt teams, the fundamentals of his Irish team down the years, Stuart. Were you disappointed in what Australia produced, given the players he had at his disposal? Not all his first choice, but given the players he had at his disposal, was that a very disappointing Joe Schmidt effort?
Yeah, it was. I mean, I think the team were poor in the first half, but in the second half, when they won the second half on the scoreboard. What concerned me was people were saying, "Cool, look at Australia. They've got so much territory. They've had so much possession." And I was looking at that and saying, I wasn't thinking that's proof that they can beat the Lions. I was thinking that reminded me of the fag end years of Ireland under Smith, when he'd gone from being someone who had such a brilliant plan to someone whose team were burdened and weighed down by the sheer amount of detail. And that 2019 World Cup, the detail was so great. Ireland went from being such a fast and pacey and original team to being a burdened team. And I thought Australia in the second half, they got their hands on their ball and they were a bit stronger, but I didn't see that magic. I didn't see a lieutenant who could just flick the switch. I mean, they don't have a 10 who can do that, but it worries me because I've been watching Australia all season, and nobody can tell me Jake Gordon is half the player that Tate McDermott is. But he had a poor game, but he was there to play a conservative, coach-driven game. And then we find that he's back in the team for the second test. And this Australia team, they need certain amount. They need muscle, and they got that. Valentini and Skelton will give them that. I think they should have played Bell from the start. I think that's a big error as well. But they also need magic behind. And this Tate McDermott has a running game around the fringes that can really tie the Lions in. And you have to tie them in to actually try and get Ikitau and Suoli'i into a little bit of space. And it's not happening. And I just watched the second half again, and it's the half everyone was saying they were better. And I was thinking, that's 2019 Ireland all over again.
Right.
Safe rugby, retention rugby. And I'm thinking, great Australian teams have an offloading game. And we're not seeing that. That second half was a very European Australian team.
Right. And without the heft to
Well, without the
pull that
heft, but
over.
I think the heft they could sort out. Skelton and Valentine. Valentini's not as big as Skelton. Skelton's skillful and he carries. Valentini's one of the best gain line men they've got, and if they get McDermott on quite early and you start sucking in Lions defenders, he can take 5 meters out of a gain. And this was a match where gain line in the first half was so overwhelmingly Lions dominance that Russell and Gibson Park were able to just stroll through the match like it was a Sunday morning Parks game. Whereas Australia, if they did edge the gain line in the second half, it was so slow that there was no creativity.
Yeah.
And they've got to address that. And it's going to be hard because young Liner is a good player, but this is no place to be starting your Test career.
Yeah.
Because of the psychology, not necessarily the standard of the Lions v Australia, but all the psychology of 40,000 people being Australia and being in your hotel room and hearing Lions, Lions, wherever you are, and you get to Test match day, and it's really big, it's massive.
Two kind of broader points to throw at you then, and I'm slightly hesitant to bring them up without stating Andy Farrell looks to have done a very good job here. These players should absolutely consider this a great achievement, one to have been picked, and if they go on to win the series, especially 3-0, a great achievement. And it can feel a little unfair on them to chip away at the sidelines, but the consensus has been this has not been a great tour. Two strands to throw at you. One, if this is 3-zip, and because the Lions happens every 4 years, they're never far from an existential conversation if things don't catch fire. Is Australia in danger as a venue, cash cow that it is, because you need that competitive, we're climbing Everest in New Zealand or South Africa. So is Australia in danger? And then also a broader one for kind of Lions Inc. to get their teeth around, no pun intended. Take the last 20 years. You pick Clive Woodward and you get a very English-dominated Lions. You pick Gatland, you get a very Welsh-dominated one. Now you get Farrell and there's an Irish-dominated one. And the obvious point, of course, is, well, those coaches get picked because their national teams are doing well, therefore it follows that the bulk of their players will be picked. But McGeechan sort of stands as the outlier in '09, Scottish, he couldn't pick 10 Scots. It's nothing against any of these Irish players because you can make a case for all of them. But I looked on as the Welsh-dominated Lions did their thing. I can understand people saying, God, this is all very Irish now. I don't know who the name is. You can't ask McGeechan to do it again. But should we have current coaches in charge of this thing?
I would like to see that anyway, because I would like us to get through a Lions tour where English and Scots aren't saying, "Oh, bloody Irish bias," and it's the Irish way. And as you say, Joe, in 2005, oh, they're picking all the English. And by the way, often it does go the wrong way. I thought Gatland, it went the wrong way sometimes as well. But that's not the coach's fault, because they are instinctively going to, if it's a tight call, they're going with the man they trust. And I wouldn't expect it any other way. So I would love to see a coach from a club, a province, another country. As long as it's not Eddie Jones, I would like to see someone independent taking them. And with that independence, I think the other thing you would get would be a slightly depressurized feel to it. It always feels to me that the four nations come together. The coach becomes a spokesman as well. The pressure for the the four of the Six Nations to do well is so great, and it is judged by results. It's not judged by performance. So if the Lions win 3-0, it's a great success. It is if you're Andy Farrell, he's a coach, and you can't deny that. And it is if you're a player. And I think you're absolutely right to say sometimes we're on the fringes and we're saying, yeah, that wasn't very good. If I was in that situation, if I'd played in 93 and we'd won the series 2-1 against a crap New Zealand team, then you'd have said, God, give us a break.
Right.
And
Yeah.
and I think a lot of fans as well feel that way. There are some fans that don't, others that do. But there are two ways of looking. There are two aspects to something like the Lions. There's the reality of the playing side, and that's a tight knit group of blokes, 40 or so, 40 plus by the time we get to the end of it. And to them, all that matters, them and the coaches, is winning. And then there's the one where we talk to people who are writing, who are on television, who are podcasting, and we mustn't get lured into this marketing frenzy of saying they've won, they've won, they've won. We have to be able to stand back and say, but Australia weren't very good. That's very important. Otherwise, journalism becomes another branch of cheerleading, and I don't want to show my pom-poms and flashy underpants. It's sort of a cheerleader. So that's really important, I think.
So, what of Australia if this continues in the vein of this
Yes. Well, first of all, they've got a World Cup in 2 years' time, so they've got a safety net as regards the Lions, because if they go well in a home World Cup, that'll get them going again. Yeah. The question is, if they lose 3-0, my worry isn't about them and the Lions in 12 years. It's about Australia as a rugby union country, full stop. League is ever stronger. The rules game is stronger. Football, women, bloke, whoever, it's a big game. It's everyone plays it all over the world. And I think if this is 3-0 and one of the games ends up a bit of a hiding, then I think Australia are just going to say, "I sod this. We got the Ashes coming up. We don't care about union." It's already, for those who don't know Australia, it's very much sort of empire rugby union. It's the public school set up. It's not the sort of, the leagues is the sort of earthy Australian union is different. So it's always been marginal in terms of numbers. It's always been Sydney and Brisbane, but with the pressure coming from league on both those cities, union is under threat. And I think before we even concern ourselves with the Lions, one should concern ourselves with Australia itself, because World Rugby doesn't have that many powerful nations that it can afford to lose a country like Australia that's got such a distinguished record in World Cups.
Yeah, I know. It's funny. We've been hearing about the danger that union is in from different Australian voices in the last couple of years, and it's only when you kind of have a Lions tour like this and you realise, my God, this is what, 2-time World Cup winners. This is, you can't lose these.
Yeah.
So yeah, it is.
But it's a reality. State of origin. No one likes saying it in union, but the state of origin, had those 3 test matches been the same weekend as 1, 2, and 3 state of origin, the big excitement would have been the rugby league. Now, that's a heresy to say, but that is the reality of where Australian sport is when we compare union and league.
Yeah. As an aside, I mentioned my should there be a kind of a non-current coach as the head coach of the Lions earlier, and everyone thought, yeah, I think so. And then we tried to think of names, and it was bloody impossible. McGeechan was like a freak unicorn. It's impossible to think of someone.
And McGeechan as well. McGeechan had that history of Lions. Correct. As well.
He's almost Lions first, Scottish second. I mean, that's how we'd all perceive him.
He is. Yeah. He is. Yeah. You pause. Which country was he? Was he Irish? No. He is a lot. He's Mr. Lions, isn't he?
Yeah. So it doesn't grow on trees. And again, it's nothing against Farrell and it's human nature, but I just wonder, Because this conversation came up when someone said, "Why is there not great cause for Irish like celebration? Record number of starters, unbelievable achievement," and there was just that aspect to it.
Yeah, what about take a crash course in England English? Wouldn't it be great if we had someone like Galtier, a French coach,
That was the
coaching?
only name we thought of.
Well,
It's funny.
and I like that because I'm getting really fed up with this debate about where are they born. You know, this whole um, the soil thing. It's a bit sort of 1930s Germany. Where were you born? It's the blood of the land. I don't give a damn. I mean, these blokes, Bundyaki couldn't be more. He'll be as committed to the Lions as any one player, and Tui Pelotta would be exactly the same, and Hansen, anyone you name. So I think, in a way, it would be nice to break away from
Would.
the boundaries of four countries, and by going to someone like Galtier, I think that would be great.
Okay, sold. And before anyone points out the obvious, we do understand Andy Farrell, born in England, represented Great Britain, Irish links. I mean, he's a perfect candidate in many ways. But
He's good. He's got a couple of ticks on the bone. Then we got Razzie Erasmus, brilliant coach, but he might not be quite what you want in 6 weeks.
yeah, how do you suspect Saturday's going to go then? As a final thought.
Um, it's funny because I want to say I think it's going to be a lot tighter than last week, and on the scoreboard last week was close enough to being almost tight. But what I think is that Australia will play better. Um, and I hope that will force the Lions to maintain more than 50 minutes of control. They did, I think Andy Farrell was right. They did lose their way a little bit. I just think the Lions have probably got just a bit too much. I like the Australian 6-2. I love the two flankers both being on the pitch. Gleeson and Tizano, really good players. And I do think that Ryan should have been left out and they should have gone two or three from Earl, Pollock, and Van der Fleer and just mix and match your second row between Byrne and Chesham. I think that's that. I think that could be a big error. And if Australia shock them and win in the last 20 minutes, I reckon they'll take the Lions at the breakdown. But as it is, I just think they're solid up front. And I know it sounds tedious, but if they're going Jake Gordon and they're going Tom Liner over Jamison Gibson Park and Finn Russell, that is a massive difference. And I know forwards say to me, it's the forwards that win it. And Australia's forwards might be competitive, but they're not going to smash the Lions forwards. So if they don't smash the Lions forwards and it's quite tight up front, is there even a debate about which halfback pair steers you? There's not. There's not. So the Lions should wrap up the series.
Okay. People can read Stuart's work in the London Times. Always great to have you on. Much appreciated, Stuart. Thank you.
It's a pleasure.